Hey everyone, it's Ivan here. So I'm actually on Easter holiday now, so this background is quite busy. I hope it doesn't bother you too much. I'm sat in the downstairs living room in my childhood home. Michelle and myself, we are visiting my mother, and there is a flare up of aggression and riots in Sweden that happened just after we left. We left on Friday, and I think the riots began the same day. I don't remember exactly, but what's been going on in Sweden over the last couple of days has been quite remarkable, and I want to speak about it a little bit. So let me preface this by speaking about my experience as a Norwegian living in Sweden for the last year or so. Um, Sweden has a past of being an imperial nation. You've seen maybe in one of my previous videos that I talked about the attempts of the Swedish Empire of taking Russia and being, stopped going to war in the Ukraine territory. And so we have, we have come to know Sweden as a very powerful force in Europe's history. And living in Sweden is an experience of finding castles pretty much everywhere. And now that Michelle and myself we're looking for a new home, some of these castles are actually popping up when we're doing searches for homes, because some of them are not even that expensive anymore. And so there is this weird duality in Sweden, where on the one hand, it's the most feminist country, it's the most politically correct country in the world, but it's also a country with a long tradition of aristocracy and and a lot of differences between the classes inside of Swedish culture. This is very different in Norway, where we're essentially been farmers and we have been ruled by either the Danes or the Swedes, alternating. And I think on some level that has made it easier for the Norwegian identity and culture to adapt to the modern times, because I see this kind of schizophrenia in Sweden, where there is an enormous amount of wealth among the upper echelons of society. And then you have ghettos all over the place. And these rich people want to be very inclusive and virtuous, and so they are that in theory, but in practice they're not. They, in my experience at least, it's limited in 1 year of living there, but it seems to me like there is this veneer of inclusivity and tolerance and progressive, being progressive, but still this aristocratic class system is running under the surface. And this has been very interesting to me over the last many months of living there. So what happened here was that a Danish politician, Swedish Danish as far as I understand, his name is Rasmus Paludans, and he's a right-wing politician who he runs the populist party, very conservative party, nationalist party, what's it called? Hardline? Let's see if we can find this. Rasmus Paludans. Let's look it up. Rasmus Paludans, yeah, he runs the party called Hardline. I didn't know about him before this happened, and he is an interesting character to me. He is an agent provocateur, though he's also a voice that dares to speak to truths in culture that nobody else dares to speak about because it's politically incorrect. And one of the things that he is speaking about is the problems that have emerged in Scandinavia around integrating a lot of immigrants, and many of them are of Muslim background. Now he goes many steps further than I would recommend anyone to do. And he actually has been burning the Quran. And the idea for him has been to demonstrate free speech and to not be afraid of doing kind of outrageous and provocative things, because he doesn't want democracy and free speech to be limited by the religious beliefs of um, quite radicalized Muslims. So that's his frame. And I think it's deeply unnecessary to go running around burning the Quran. It's well, I wouldn't do it. I don't think anyone should do it. It's it's important to respect others and their beliefs and their cultures. And all Muslims that I basically have met or known have been very sweet people. But there does seem to be a problem in Sweden with a lot of Muslims starting to gather in these ghettos where there's quite a bit of lawlessness. And that is a problem. And the Swedish politicians have not dared to speak about it because, they want to be seen as inclusive. And again, I wonder if this is somehow some kind of atonement for being an aristocratic country, not being quite able to deal with the past. But, that's just speculation. Well, let me share here the screen. We go over to this Reuters article. Now, I don't typically refer to Reuters anymore because they're very unreliable, but I don't find anything unreliable about this particular story. So let's go with it. It says here that riots erupt in Sweden's Örebro ahead of right-wing extremist demonstration. Well, it's you could have all kinds of debates around the definition of right-wing extremist. He's definitely far right. This guy, is he an extremist because he's burning the Quran? Well, that's maybe a topic of debate, and it's clear here that there is a particular angle. I find it quite interesting. Violent riots erupted in the central Swedish city of Örebro on Friday as counter-protesters attacked police ahead of a planned right-wing extremist demonstration. Police said on his website that 4 police cars had been set on fire and at least 4 police officers and 1 private individual had been injured as protesters threw stones and large groups attacked police cordons, I don't know what that is actually, and tore down riot fences. There's been a bit of debate in Norwegian media over the last couple of days as to this angle. It's an interesting angle because all of the responsibility is placed on the right-wing extremists, and then it's as if these Muslim rioters that actually were the ones bringing the violence, and they were burning police cars, and I think the amount of injured police now is close to 30. Schools have been set on fire. I've seen videos of this. It's very troubling stuff. Yet the narrative here in Reuters indicates that this is just about some right-wing nut jobs, and then there seems to be some kind of counter protest, but there is no criticism or judgment or denouncing of this counter protesters, even though they have wrought a lot of destruction on multiple cities in Sweden. This is narrative, right? This is how the media controls narrative, focusing in on the right-wing extremist part of it. Though, is this going to fly this time? That's one of the questions that I have, because clearly this guy, Rasmus, he has culpability in what's happened. He has intentionally triggered the Muslim community with the act of burning their holy text. Though it is legal to do that in Sweden, it is not legal to set fire to police, to attack civilians and police, and to wreak havoc on at least 4 cities, as far as I know. Linköping, Norrköping, Örebro, and Malmö, I know, have been scenes of pretty violent riots. So I don't know what you think about this, but it's notable. It's notable the kind of angle. So let's look at this guy a little bit. Here's Rasmus. He runs this political party Hardline, or Stramkurs, and we can read here that Stramkurs is the most patriotic party in Denmark. We are that because we have, I'm translating as I go here, have the fundamental standpoint that we as a Danish political party always should be prioritizing the happiness of Danes over all other people's happiness. That should be obvious for any Danish political party, but we are unfortunately the only political party that think this way. Yeah, we have a clash of worldviews here. This is the nationalist worldview of this party, and it's the more globalist worldview of a lot of politicians in Scandinavia by now. I think the globalist worldviews have gone too far. And when you see what is happening in the name of globalism through the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab's minions, I'm like, hang on a minute. I don't want this kind of globalism. And so this guy becomes a populist leader in the same tradition as Bolsonaro in Brazil and Trump in the US and our friend in Hungary, Viktor Orban. There are these kinds of more traditional nationalist men. Are they extremists? Well, the globalist press seems to think so. They're certainly provocative. They're certainly, well, at odds with the general establishment. Let's just say it like that for now. Here's a little bit, some scenes from what happened. As you can see here, there's a lot of, I'm imagining that these are generally youth, but they're pummeling the police cars with rocks that were reportedly transported into the city centers. They were setting fire to police cars. They stole buses, as far as I understand. They set fire to buses. It's been pretty intense. I think I have another one here as well. Let's see. Oh, that was the same one. Let's do the other one. Yeah, here you can see several police vans here on fire. You can see here now, again, the similar pattern. Days of aggressive. Here we go. I don't know if you can hear this with the live stream. Days of aggressive counter-protests have been sparked across Sweden against numerous far-right rallies. The demonstrations were in response to an event to burn a copy of the Quran in the town of Landskrona. Organized by the far-right anti-Muslim political party Hardline. Oh, they're a populist nationalist party. Police allowed the rally to go ahead and moved it 27 miles south to the city of Malmö. But this failed to quell counter-riots as opponents of the far-right party burned and threw stones at police cars and city buses. So they seem to struggle with saying that a lot of Muslim antagonists set many Swedish cities on fire. It's like it's hard for Western media to say this because this has not been narrative. It's not been an approved narrative. Interestingly, though, the general tone from the prime minister as well as police in Sweden is actually pretty hardline. Pardon the pun there. Um, but she's clear, Magdalena Andersson, the prime minister, that anyone that attacks Swedish police attacks the Swedish democratic system. And yeah, there's a use of a language here inside of Sweden that seems more uncompromising than I have seen it previously. And so I'm wondering, are we moving here towards the slow decline and death of political correctness, at least in Sweden? It would be interesting to know. We'll see over the next months and years. But here's the thing. I scan patterns, and I care a lot about patterns being consistent across different theaters of war or different political arenas, and that the media holds views that are congruent and aligned across these different arenas. And so if you have a perspective in, for instance, Sweden, that you have this nationalist, populist politician that burns the Quran, he's some kind of far right extremist, then I would expect you to be very suspicious of or even critical of far right extremist movements and people and ideologies in other countries as well. But this is where the Western media is just irredeemably corrupt at this point. Because look at what's happening with the Azov battalion and the other neo-Nazi inspired battalions in Ukraine. They have been redeemed by our press over the last month and a half because they're fighting against Putin. And so it doesn't matter that many of them are literally Nazis, because it is not conducive to the narrative that they want to tell in Ukraine. So it's conducive to criticize somebody who's a nationalist in Scandinavia quite hard, but it's not conducive to the narrative to criticize actual Nazis in Ukraine. This is very problematic. And I had this, I know this pisses some people off, but at the end of the day, what matters to me, and I think should matter to anyone, is truth. And so if you look here at how the Western media was talking about the Azov and the other battalions in Ukraine that are inspired by Nazi ideology, this is how we talked about them just a couple of years ago. You can see it. You can see down here, German TV shows Nazi symbols on helmets of Ukraine soldiers. So you literally see swastikas and SS symbols there. You can see here, yes, it's still okay to call Ukraine C-14 neo-Nazi. Neo-Nazis on the far right are on the march in Ukraine. This was all over the Western media when it was compatible with a narrative. But now it's not compatible with a narrative anymore. Also, bear in mind, and I find this super interesting, that fighting on the side of Putin, you have Kadyrov, the president, I think he's president, or is his prime minister? I think he's president of of Chechnya, and he's a Muslim. Chechnya is a Muslim country, and so you have these big Muslim infantry battalions fighting for Putin in Mariupol and other places. And if they were in Sweden, then the international media would probably struggle with saying who they really are. But since it's conducive to the narrative that we're telling about Ukraine, to actually denounce them in Ukraine, then all of a sudden there's a different standard there. This is the kind of stuff that drives me up the wall. It's absolutely unacceptable in my book. You can't have one standard in Europe and in Sweden, and you have a completely different standard in Ukraine. I mean, you're seeing what I'm seeing, I'm sure, right? And so here we are in Sweden. Well, I'm not currently in Sweden, but I live in Sweden. And we've had all of these very destructive tendencies that are being spoken of in international media in such a way as to hide that there are Muslims doing it. And then Sweden somehow seems to be moving towards being more sober, more objective in describing what is actually happening. And it's new. Sweden is this super politically correct country, and even saying this kind of a thing in the past has been associated with you being a bloody racist, and so people haven't wanted to do it. So it's all very complex, and to compare it with the other theaters of conflict around the world right now makes it even more complex, and so complex that it's really hard to understand what's going on. But a lot of the time, when I look deeper into these things, I find the hidden hand of the CIA and the United States operating under these things. I have no particular reason to believe that that is the case in Sweden, but I know it's the case in Ukraine. And in the next video that I do in this kind of live stream format, I intend to speak a little bit more about the funding that the United States has given the Azov Battalion and how it seems to be a playbook that is similar to how the United States supported the Mujahideen in Afghanistan many years ago as a provocation, or they said it was supposed to be a defense against the Soviet Union, but they actually started to fund the Mujahideen before the Soviet Union invaded. And here it's starting to get very controversial and very interesting. Are we watching the same playbook in Ukraine play out again? And I'm going to do a video on that pretty soon. But yeah, I wanted to speak to this. It's certainly something that we're thinking about as we're looking for a home in Sweden. I'm not too keen on being around these kind of riots, and I think it's such a shame, because there's so much beauty in Islam. The Sufi tradition is absolutely like beautiful beyond comprehension, and so we have some of our most profound spiritual teachings coming out of Islam. And yet we're ending up in these conflict situations again and again between the West and Islam. And I don't trust it, man. It seems unnecessary to me. And I want to start digging into it more. So, hope you're well. Hope this was of some help. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I'd like to be in conversation with you around these controversial topics. And I know that, it's a kind of topic that is, rare to come by, but I see more and more people are talking about it. And so let's have a conversation around it. What do you think is going on here? Do you see it as that the media is actually presenting this in a sober, objective way internationally? When you see the Reuters angle, do you find it strange that there are different standards in different countries? Let me know. And if you want more on this kind of commentary on this channel, then like and subscribe. Okay. I'll speak to you later, my friends. Enjoy the rest of your Easter.